chat. Well, hello there. I'm Rafael de Furia, back at it again on another Friday night, even though it's actually a Thursday afternoon right now. Today happens to be my birthday. I feel like I often end up recording on my birthdays. I always try to tell myself, all right, this is going to be the year, I take it off completely. But in today's episode, what I wanted to do was kind of two things. This week / weekend in Braga, there's actually a bit of a Roman takeover. And so I wanted to show that to you guys because it's kind of tied in with something that I want to talk about this week, which actually is really funny for me, moving from Italy to Portugal and then arriving in a city with Roman roots. Which is kind of interesting. But the other thing is that I wanted to talk about kind of something that is becoming more of a popular topic, like why move to Braga over Lisbon or over Porto? Because a lot of people, especially younger people, even for myself, I had definitely thought that it would have been a better choice for me to consider a larger city. But since coming here and having this kind of be the default place that I was kind of thrust into, I'm really glad that I ended up here. But anyway, just before we get into the rest of this episode, of course, a huge thank you to those of you who help to make episodes like this possible on a regular basis through Patreon, patreon.com/RafaelDeFuria, RafaelDeFuria.com/Patreon, as well as the one-time donations and the purchases of the shirts, mugs, onesies, and more. But I think it's about time that we get started, so roll that intro. So just while we're walking up into the center, right now we're already on the center. This is Avenida de Liberdade. This part of the street here goes all the way just from a pedestrian area, and then all the way down behind me it becomes a car / semi-pedestrian area. But this part of it is fully pedestrian, and underneath is actually a major street. So to get some of the car traffic out of the center, they dug down, and something that I like, and it makes it very livable here. So comparing it to another city like Lisbon or Porto, what is really nice is that you can feel like you're in a little bit of a smaller town. It's still a city. It's the third largest in the country, if I'm not mistaken. And so you do have some of the benefits of being in the city as well. If you need to go shopping for food, shopping for clothing, shopping for whatever, you'll probably be able to find it here. And so it's not like moving to a small village out in the middle of nowhere, or even to some of the cities down in the very far south, in the Algarve, for example, where you may not have some of these things. Even, for example, Braga itself has 3 malls, so very easy. And then, of course, there's an IKEA here. So for somebody just moving to a new place, it makes the transition a little bit easier, especially at the beginning, before you get everything figured out and you find all of your local shops where you can get your shopping taken care of. And so that's the other thing for me, is that, yeah, in Lisbon or Porto, you could get like all the stuff that you need. You're not going to have a hard time finding what it is that would be of interest to you. However, you won't be able to escape the hustle and bustle of the city. I can say in the couple times since I've been to Porto, since living here in Braga, it's been a really nice relief at the end of the day to be able to come here and just lay back and not feel like I'm a sardine, for lack of a better word, of all places, Portugal, to use that term. But you feel like sometimes a sardine in the cities, and that you feel like you just have so much packed around you, so many tourists, and that you can't just necessarily take the time to rest and relax like you can here. And one thing that I've really enjoyed about being in Braga is that I can work my full day, I can have my everything that I do, and at the end of the day, I can feel like I'm on vacation. That's a huge bonus there. And so here is the first little sign of what's happening here in Braga. Just that little archway, but that's nothing in comparison to what's up over here. But just continuing on what I was talking about before, what's really nice is to have the option with the train here that, say I do want to get out of town, I'm in Porto, like just under an hour, just over an hour, depending on the train. Very easy. And even with how things are currently set up, say if I wanted to go to Lisbon, 3-ish hours or so. I've spoken to friends here that have said that it's like about 3.5 hours. So that's fantastic. And I think about the next 5 years or so, they're going to open up a high-speed line that is going to dramatically lower the amount of time from Braga to Lisbon. I heard actually it could even be faster than going to Porto. I mean, this is huge. And there's interest from major companies that are here. So it's not like you're moving to the middle of nowhere with no interest. And then also, supposedly Braga has this reputation for being like a startup hub. I haven't seen so much of that yet, but I have seen kind of some of the organizations that go around and help support those startups. So it's very interesting, especially when you consider that the golden visa is no longer possible for people going to places like Lisbon and Porto. Next tier down gets you to Braga, Coimbra, and I think one or two other cities. At the end of the day, Braga does have things. You can live here, you can work here, but would I recommend necessarily getting a job in Portugal? Not necessarily. I would say more so if you can come to Portugal and work as a digital nomad or something, earn an American income or a German or Northern European income, that's when you really be able to fully take advantage of the country, because local incomes are so-so. Just to be completely bluntly honest about it. There are even a lot of people who do find it very difficult to get by based on their income, because minimum basic income here isn't all that much. But comparing Lisbon to Braga again, or even Porto, you do often here have a lot of events and things going on. Like this week is the Braga Romana. Originally, Braga was an encampment, a Roman encampment settlement called Braga Romana. And so for this little time right now, they've actually got some festivities. There's a festival, there's parades. I missed the parades, and they have performances, and I'll try to insert some footage, as well as beyond just the performances, they have like just these random, I don't know how to put it any other way than jesters that come through the street and to entertain people while they're eating, while they're walking, and people dressed up as Roman centurions coming through and having fun with the kids, and kind of it just it's a fun experience. There's a lot of things for sale that have been made, and actually, unlike a lot of other markets, you do find things here that look like they are not necessarily like everything made in China. It looks like there are a lot of things that are a bit more local, not necessarily everything. I've actually seen some local honeys, for example, here, as well as liqueurs, little gifts, soaps, and so on. Like this place here does soap, but I don't think it's necessarily local. And so in a small city like Braga, you do have these events that happen. It's not like you're just living in some backwater city that's out in the middle of nowhere. And from what I've been hearing, just about, say, every month during the summer, there's something going on. And then also for Easter, that Semana Santa, the Holy Week, around that time, it's huge. I mean, like, it's so many things going on. It's not like this. It's a completely different experience. But again, like, you don't have to feel like you're in a crowded, huge city. You have events going on. But of course, being in a place like Lisbon, you're in the capital. You're in the place that's like maybe more Portuguese than Portugal. Not necessarily, of course. In different parts of the country, you have very different feels. So there's not, in a way similar to Italy, there's not just one version of Italy. There's not one version of Portugal. The north is different from the south, the center, the coast, the interior. Wherever you go, you're going to have a very different experience. And then, just taking it one step at a time. Okay, if you do want to come to a country, what are you going to have to go through? What are you going to have to do from a legal perspective? What are you going to have to do just to be able to get settled here? When you go to a larger city, very often the municipal offices are going to be even more burdened down, so many more people. Not necessarily if you're getting like a visa to be here. For example, CEF, the current authority in place that helps take care of some of these things, your appointment is not necessarily going to be based on where it is that you're living, but where it is that they have an opening. So you could be living here in Braga, but be sent like 3-4 hours away for an appointment, and your spouse might be sent to somewhere up by the Spanish border on the same day. This happens. So from that perspective, maybe if you're having to get a visa here and all that, it's not going to be so much different. But dealing with just like, say, for example, if you're a European citizen, then it becomes a bit easier because you're only dealing with your municipal offices. You're not having to go to 50 different places and just make life easier. And I don't think I'm going to find it now, but just here at this little festival, they do also have performances throughout the day. Like yesterday, they had some really cool music going on and dancing, like ballet in the evening. It was really interesting. A lot of smoke. Oh, let's go check out this little encampment down here. You can definitely smell like some incense and different things being burnt. But this is just giving a little bit of an idea of a little bit more of this festival here and what you'll find. And actually we'll go in a minute or two and you'll see there's another kind of recreation of an encampment up on top of the hill. So this is showing, I guess, more Roman medicine type things. This is not really like, oh, okay, this what is, no, this is an overview of everything that you'll find at a place like this, and just kind of having this as the background of what you can end up enjoying in a place like Braga, because there are a lot of people who think, oh, small city, nothing, but it's a small city, something. Even, for example, right now, we're just going to get up to the main cathedral here, and right in front of the cathedral you have a ton of places where you can go for a drink, you can go for a bite to eat, and just have a fun time. I showed it in a previous video, but since we're here and kind of showing what you can find in a place like Braga, well, here's what you may be able to enjoy while being here. There's all these different cafes and bars that you can enjoy, and this place gets busy actually in the evenings. So if you want to go out, have an evening out, and this is the part of town that you'll be able to kind of have that in. Also, in this area there are a ton of little restaurants and great places to be able to visit. But a downside in general in Portugal right now, we're finding that prices for everything, especially apartments, are going up. In Braga, someone was telling me yesterday, I don't know within what time period, but a friend was telling me that the rents or the price of property has gone up by 80% here. In Lisbon, I believe it's gone up maybe 20 or 30. So this is something to take into consideration. When are you going to do? How are you going to do? What are you going to do? This is all going on. So like there are these community events. You have the nice parts of being in a big city, but just jumping some rope in the middle of the street here. 2 Roman guards on the sides. And then just some Roman soldiers walking around, just doing their thing. It's a full-on invasion. Can you believe it? In a way, if you think about it though, when it comes to the real estate and all that, maybe potentially the sooner that you arrive, the better that you might do, especially for purchasing, renting. I mean, even in Braga, this is actually something that's very, very tricky. Finding an apartment here, I would say, was nearly impossible. And as soon as one came available, I jumped on it immediately, because there was one apartment that I ended up sleeping on, and I didn't move as fast as I maybe should have, but in the end, I'm glad that I did, because I ended up getting a better place that was more appropriate, that was more in the location that I was interested in. But then of course, one of the other major things that has to do with real estate is actually the cost of the property. And I would say in Lisbon and Porto, you will be spending more for less. If you go to another place, like say for example Guimarães, Braga, or other not main top tier, like tier 1 cities, the prices are just going to be absurd. Even here, for equivalent properties, or even better in Braga in comparison to Lisbon, I was looking recently, and there were some places that were anywhere from, like, say, a third to half more than what you would find in Braga. So, like, in Lisbon you can find, but those prices are going to be higher. And then also you have to consider, do you want to be in the city, or do you want to be just out? Do you want to be in a tourist or a expat enclave, like for example Cascais? That's one situation where you will find that actually, even though you're outside of Lisbon, it will cost more. And that's kind of where a lot of, how do I put it, a little bit more high-end luxury property out there. You do find a lot of Californians who go there. There are palm trees, and so that's a hot spot. So if you're looking for that, and you're looking for that expat community to recreate that experience of something more familiar in a new country, then maybe that could be an interesting place for you. But wow, look at this. So you see there's a lot happening at this little event here today. Little market out here. Romulus and Remus. Cakes, cookies.
Olha, o homem tinha um, era mais rápido.
Ela tinha dois, 5 minutos.
And just because I know some of you guys will end up being curious about prices of things, you can get like a Portuguese bifana, like a pork sandwich that'll be like €3.50. Sangria could be like €2, but maybe you have to pay a euro deposit because they're giving it in like a clay pot. Other sandwiches may be like €3, €4, €5, depending on what they are. So they're not like crazy expensive in comparison with other parts of the world. It's very reasonable, and the cost of living here in general, in comparison to Porto and Lisboa, it's going to be lower. Even though, what I will say is that you do find a lot of prices for things here at like what might even be considered a lower cost, a cheaper place to go, might be higher than what you may find in other places. Especially like a local tasquinha, like a little, I guess, what do you call it? Like a little pub of sorts, like a Portuguese place where you can go and get some like good grub. Those places may be a little bit more expensive here than what you may find other places. So that's another thing to take into consideration. But will it be cheaper than Lisbon and Porto? Yeah. But of course, in a big city, you will have more variation. You will be able to find some like cheaper things to get. Like, I walked by a place in Porto the other day for a burger. I think it was like €5, €4, right next to the train station. But for the equivalent burger here, maybe you pay 7 or 8. But this is just comparing the average of what you might find here versus just one that I happen to find there. So again, with the variety will come more options potentially. Oh, I'm so mad this is all closed. It's part of the reason why I came out this afternoon. Maybe I'll have to come back tomorrow and see if I can record. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but just to show you this little encampment here that they have. It's a Braga military encampment. And on the inside, they've got some horses up there and some falcons, some owls, and some just like showing how they would relax and so on. I think I may actually have some footage on my phone, so maybe I'll insert that here just to give you a little idea of what you would be able to find. But of course, you do find other things here that add to quality of life, or that can accompany your experience, I guess. Like for example, this building right here in front of me, it's a public library. Most of what they have is in Portuguese. They do have some DVDs that I believe are with English movies and so on. And they do have a small section of books that are in English. So, I mean, if you are an English only speaker, I mean, it's not a bad option if you're the type of person who really enjoys reading. And I can say, as somebody who's been living abroad for like 13 years, that this is not common to find in a place. And this isn't the only library here, but to find a library and that they have books in English, I've not had that experience every place I've been. I've been to some places where maybe you would have a private library from an organization, and they got a few things, but to have a decent like English speaking section of a bookshelf and a half, that's going to be something that you'll find here. Even I spoke to a librarian here and they said apparently you can go to the university, join there, and they have a much larger section of books that have English as the language that they're written in. But then, kind of on the subject of living every day, day-to-day life, in the centers of these cities, I would say they tend to be pretty walkable. You're not going to find that everything is perfect, and especially Portugal has a lot of hills, a lot of mountains. I mean, even this is a slight hill here, goes downhill over there. Let's go in this direction because there's some food and stuff over here that'll be interesting to see. Kind of like what was behind me, what we had already seen before. But even though, for example, Porto is a very hilly, mountainous almost city, I would still say you can walk around there. Braga, in the center, I'm not going to say it's completely flat, but it's much more flat by comparison. Very, very walkable. And Lisbon, when you're in the center, like the more touristy area in Baixa, yeah, you'll find that, for example, that's going to be pretty flat there. But then you get to Bairro Alto, the upper neighborhood, just right next to it, and you're going to have some pretty big hills there. But when you get to the top, it also gets pretty flat. So that's another thing to take into consideration. I don't have a car here. I don't want a car here. And would I maybe get one in the future? Yeah. But at this point in my life, I find it to be very convenient to be able to just walk everywhere. I do sometimes use the shared scooters that you can just rent from an app. The streets are very bumpy. The sidewalks, very bumpy, very, very bumpy. I mean, if you look at this, this is an example of just one of the bumpiest places in town. So, is it the most comfortable ride? Not necessarily. I would say very much not so. But I've been in places that are worse, so it's okay. But look at this meat. Wow. It's fantastic. So, like I said, they have like these people going around the town and creating a fun experience for the people that are here to create this really festive environment, very family friendly. And that's also another thing about Braga, is that it really is a very family friendly city, but also it's not just family friendly, it's friendly to a large amount of different groups of people. This is supposed to be the most religious Catholic city with the oldest history in Portugal when it comes to the religion. However, what's also very interesting is I've seen a lot of same-sex couples here that are holding hands, kissing, that are out in the street, comfortable to be here. And I've actually spoken with some couples that they feel very comfortable to be here, but maybe in a city that they lived in America, they wouldn't feel the same level of comfort to be able to express themselves and just exist and be. So even though maybe tolerant isn't exactly the word that I'm looking for, because there's definitely a lot of that here, maybe what I would say is that it's not that the people are accepted or not accepted. It's about that you just can be. You can do your thing. You can live your life. But can you find that in other places? Yeah, I would say so. But it's nice to be in a smaller place where you can also find that. Personally, it's not something that I've ever had to deal with because I don't have that same-sex attraction. So I don't understand all the ins and outs that people go through in their daily lives. But for the people who I have spoken with, who do have that as part of their life, they are very comfortable and happy to live here. So, I mean, hey, that's cool. I mean, that you can just exist and be happy and not have to be concerned looking over your shoulder. I mean, that alone is a huge, huge thing. Braga, in comparison to other places like Lisbon and Porto, you can't compare the safety and security here. I mean, I know even people that will be, I mean, I know, for example, women here that they are not afraid to walk out at night. Okay, of course, you keep an eye over your shoulder, but you don't have that same level of just being able to go and do like you might in a bigger city, that you have to be concerned. I mean, just in the past like 6 or so months since I've been living here, what I can say is that I've heard a number of stories of even guys, like big dudes, at a nightclub or outside of a nightclub just in the streets of Lisbon, being beaten up, having their wallets and phones stolen from them. Can't say I've ever heard that here. Of course, it could be possible that it could happen, but generally speaking, a city like Braga is going to be much, much safer. And we're also talking about cities that are already, just in general, very safe to begin with. So we're not talking about like places that are, oh, they're crime-ridden and this and that and the other. No, we're talking about places that are actually just, in general, like quite fine. But they still, everywhere's gonna have its own thing. Everywhere has its own problems. It's just, at the end of the day, you have to be willing to understand what are the problems that you're willing to deal with. Everywhere has its thing. What are the things that you can deal with personally? But anyway, as we come through the main archway here in Braga, I think this will be a great way to end off the video. So of course, thank you so much for joining me for another Friday night, for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Of course, I'm Rafael de Furia. Thank you so much for all supporting and watching and subscribing, sharing this with your friends and family. And of course, the likes and subscribes all very much help the project to be able to continue to push forward. Especially a huge, huge thank you to the supporters through Patreon, as well as a huge thank you to those of you who also give the one-time donations, as well as purchase the shirts, mugs, onesies, and more. Anyway, like I said, this is where I'm going to end it off, right here, the main kind of port archway into the city. Stay safe and healthy out there, and I'll see you all next time. Later.